The views, ideas, and content of WellSeekers and their guests are their own opinions, and you should always seek additional professional help around any of the issues discussed here on WellSeekers.
Hello and welcome to WellSeekers, where we are helping you rise and come back to a mind and life that you'll love. My name's Lucia, and I am so honored to be here and to continue this series on rising and coming back from addiction. If you've been with us, this is part 4 of our 6-part series, and we've just had such incredible conversations. If you are part of our family here and you've been with us for a while, you know we're all about stories and solutions at WellSeekers. I believe stories shatter shame. We're going to talk about that a little bit in just a moment. And our guest this week is going to talk about that a lot. Her name is Wendy Adamson. Wendy is an author, and she wrote a book called Motherload, a memoir of addiction, gun violence, and finding a life of purpose. It's about Wendy's addiction, but it's also about her early recovery and her recovery in general. And life as a mom. I wanted to specifically do this show because I know we have a lot of females who are listening, a lot of women that are listening, a lot of moms that are listening. And this book, as a female, I'm not even a mom, it really spoke to me as a woman. I have friends that are moms in recovery, and there's a lot of shame around that. This book spoke to them as well. I've suggested it to a few people. So Wendy's going to come on and talk about her personal story and this book. So excited for that conversation. If you've missed our past shows, though, I would like to just give a plug to go back and listen to it when we plan these series. We really look at it from a holistic point of view, how we can help guide you on your pathway through this challenge. We've gotten emails, some people listening, they have loved ones that are suffering from addiction, and they want to know too, from a holistic approach, how to help them rise and come back and how to take care of themselves. So I really encourage you to go back and listen to our other shows. We talked about new and innovative treatment approaches. We talked about ways to care for yourself and the ones that you love in relationship and family, through addiction and through recovery. And we also talked about the power of nutrition in recovery from addiction. So absolutely, we'll put links below so you can go back and visit those shows if you missed them. The thing that came up when I was planning this show, and one of the things that I'm fascinated by as both a storyteller, which is my background, and as a licensed mental health professional, is the impact storytelling has on shattering shame. If you know me, you know that I also like research, and I like going back and looking at research that's been done. One thing that I found was there was not a lot of research, so maybe I will be doing this as I move forward in my own career, on storytelling and shame. We do know that when you hear someone's story, right, it makes us more, I know this from a personal point of view, it makes us more open to acknowledging and accepting our own story, right? Brené Brown, obviously huge in the world of shame, talking about shame resilience theory, which is basically saying that shame causes people to feel trapped, powerless, isolated. And what Brené suggests is that shame can trigger, right, all of these different things, but there is a way to break free from your shame. Let's talk about the 4 steps that she talks about. 1 is recognizing the personal vulnerability that led you to feeling shame. 2 is recognizing the external factors that led to the feelings of shame. 3 is connecting with others to receive and offer empathy. And 4 is discussing and deconstructing the feelings of shame themselves. So that's how Brené, who is obviously one of the main researchers in the world of shame, talks about how to come out on the other side to break free from your shame. When I read those, the one thing that came to mind was storytelling, being open, personal vulnerability, right? Looking at, when you're telling your story, all the things that contributed to the shame, connecting with others to receive and offer empathy, and then discussing and deconstructing those feelings, right? What better, more powerful way to do that than through our stories? That is why I believe, and not just because I'm a storyteller, that stories are a huge piece of the shame puzzle and getting rid of shame, getting rid of stigma. Addiction is one of those big, big topics that still carries a lot of shame, a lot of stigma, even in 2021. So it is so important, especially I feel as a woman. Again, especially for moms that I know that do struggle from addiction and who are also in recovery. That's the other thing that I've always found interesting in my own journey is people so often are even scared to say they're in recovery from addiction. That's why books like Wendy's Motherload are so important, why having these conversations are so important. And I'm just so excited to dive into it, to have you hear someone's story, hopefully have you relate to some of this story to see that you're not alone. And I'm just so excited if you are holding or carrying shame to have this conversation that hopefully helps you. So we are going to be right back with Wendy Adamson. She is the author of Motherload, a memoir of addiction, gun violence, and finding a life purpose. She also, full disclosure, is a friend of mine. I adore Wendy. She just holds such a special place in my heart for such a special time in my life. So I encourage you to stick around and to also share this conversation so we can continue shattering shame and stigma. We'll be right back with Wendy Adamson on WellSeekers.
Today's lifestyle demands the best in wireless, and with Pulse Cellular, you have the best options available. Switch to Pulse Cellular for unlimited talk, text, and high-speed data, coast to coast with no contracts, no credit checks, and no overage fees. One line for $65 or 4 lines for just $45 each, including hotspot, Wi-Fi calling, and 50 gigs per line. And for all you travelers, we got you covered in Canada and Mexico. Plus, text and data in over 210 countries worldwide, all with the best phones or bring your own. That's pretty awesome. Get the best user experience on mobile at pulsecellular.com.
You're listening to WellSeekers, a show where the journey is just as important as the destination.
Welcome back to WellSeekers. We are joined by my guest, Wendy Adamson. Wendy is a friend for many years. She also has over 20 years of experience as a seasoned professional in the field of mental health and substance abuse. She not only has vast knowledge of addiction, but as a sober woman, a deep understanding of the recovery process as well. Wendy is a published author. The articles in HuffPo, Singular Magazine, and thefix.com. Wendy's memoir, Motherload, which we're going to be talking about a lot today, shares her own struggle of hitting rock bottom, which led to her ultimate recovery. Wendy, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Lucia. It's so good to see you.
I know. Before we started recording, we were saying that I don't think I've seen you since 2000. We've tried a couple times when I was in Los Angeles, but 2006?
Yeah, 2006 probably. That's
I was 5.
Wow.
No, I'm kidding.
Wow. Yeah. And I was 16.
Yeah, exactly. Long time ago.
Long time ago.
Wendy, we're doing a series on addiction, and I thought of you immediately for 2 reasons, and both mentioned in your introduction. One, because I know you have experience as a professional in substance use disorders and recovery and work with addiction. And then secondly, because of your book, Motherload.
Right.
I want to talk about both aspects of it. The thing that struck me the most is having known Wendy for all these years. I've heard your story before, right? But when I read it, there was just something about the way you described your experience with addiction, that the toll and the impact that it took not only on your life, but the life of your children, right? Your marriage, and then even going backwards and seeing more about where you came from, right? Your experience growing up. For some reason, and if anyone listening or watching has someone that they love that struggles with addiction, or maybe past or currently, right, or they struggle as well. I'm not just saying this because I know Wendy, it's a must read, because I have heard stories for decades now, and it literally like a bullseye just touched upon every aspect of what addiction does to a person and their family. So thank you for writing it, first of all, and sharing your story. What did make you decide I'm finally going to put this on paper?
I had a revelation, if you will, that my story could help a lot of not just people dealing with addiction, but mothers who have struggled and made mistakes in parenting. It could help kids that are still struggling to forgive their parents. It could, I wanted to show the power of the healing that can happen as a result of recovery. Obviously, there's a ripple effect from addiction, but there's also a ripple effect from recovery. And I was very committed and remain committed to healing the relationships with my children and now my grandchildren who've never seen me high or drink. So I had this revelation, this story could help women that are incarcerated, that could help girls in juvenile hall, because that's where I go in the book. I end up once again in jail, and I'm like, when I was there, I could never get my hands on a book that I could relate to. I was reading whatever, Stephen King book I could get, or whatever, the rise and fall of the Third Reich, because you don't have access. And I had no role models growing up as a kid. So a lot of times I struggled. As you know, the book is very vulnerable, very real, and it's a hard topic to write about, making mistakes with your children, and I come from a background of secrecy, which was some of the problem. Working in the field of mental health and specifically with teens right now, I know the impact the generational trauma can have on kids. And it's like, it's like through a web of family loyalties, like via secrets that were too heavy for me to bear, I started using drugs. When I first started talking about my mother and specifically writing about it in this book, it was like breaking an emotional contract or chain that I had with my family. I was speaking what the parents couldn't speak, because they too suffered from trauma. I should explain, my mother was schizophrenic. My father was alcoholic. My mother killed herself when I was 7. We didn't discuss that. It was a secret. Everything with mental illness back when I was growing up was not talked about. There's too much stigma around it. So we didn't talk about it. But I started talking about it, and it was like breaking free from, the assigned or unconsciously with the parent's injury that was placed on me, and healing ancestral trauma and changing the trajectory of my life, and therefore affecting my kids' life, my grandkids, and hopefully, so on.
I think that you summed up most of the aspects, right? Intergenerational trauma is often not talked about. It's obviously just taken into the next generation, right? And oftentimes repeated. There's something that you described. There's a part in the book where you're talking, Wendy, about being at home, right? And I've heard you, again, say this verbally. You've told this story, but when the way that it's written, you have to read this book. I want to hear you tell our audience. So, but that point where you have your 2 young children sleeping, right? Ricky and Jerry are sleeping. Your husband's out. You have someone come that sells you some drugs, right? Or gives you, you were selling drugs. There was a drug transaction of sorts, right?
Yeah. Well, here, I'll tell it.
Yeah, please.
So
there's a line that stood out to me.
There's a few lines that stand out, but it's 1991, and May 17, 91. And I had been doing meth, and my husband at the time was scoring for people. He would go score drugs to get our little cut from whatever he scored. And at the time I was waiting for my older son was asleep 2 blocks away. Jerry was sleeping at a friend's house. Ricky was asleep in the house. And it occurred to me, he's cheating on me. And it, kind of hit me like, a 2x4 on the head. It was like, why hadn't I seen it sooner? Because he was gone for so long with this girl. She was 24, cute, and had what is a classic textbook psychotic break with the meth. And so what's also significant, my mother at 38, when she killed herself, I said I would never, ever be like her. And saying never was like giving the universe the exact coordinates to where I would later land, because I was 38. I had a psychotic break. I grabbed a gun. I ran outside with the gun. And when they got back from scoring the meth, and I shot at the car. And, I don't know what line you're referring to, but I started running down the street in this little neighborhood with the gun, chasing them, and they had turned the corner and pulled over. I fired another round and ended up shooting the girl in the arm, the other woman. And so, my best thinkings told me, go change your clothes so the cops won't recognize you. If you have to stand in a lineup, if you put on some different clothes, nobody will be able to identify you. That was my thinking. And needless to say, I never did stand in a lineup, but the cops did come and haul me away. And that is where the book starts, is like the unraveling, the leveling of life, experience. That there I was, 38, same age as my mother, had lost her mind, But once you lose your mind, how do you get it back? Mm-hmm. How do you get it back? Once you lose your children, how do you get them back? And so it's, of course, I wanted it to happen immediately, but I ended up getting a year in the county jail. And during that year, a lot happened, not only outside in the free world, but inside me, because I was pretty much locked up inside before I ever ended up in jail. I was locked down in secrecy, and could not talk about the things that had happened as a kid. I couldn't talk about my mother's schizophrenic breaks and her suicidal attempts, and as when you have a schizophrenic mother that is trying to constantly try to kill herself, as a kid, you can get in the way, Mm-hmm. And specifically when she turned on all the gas in the house, after an argument with my dad stormed off to the bar. She turned on all the gas, and the kids were in the house. The fire department later came and dragged us out onto the front lawn, So there I was, pretty much living my mother's life, She had been in Camarillo State Hospital when I was a kid before she killed herself. Many times she was there. I would end up many times in Camarillo State Hospital. I was unconsciously living her life. There's a quote that Jung, that I love: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Mm-hmm. I thought it was my fate. I thought it was the cards I had been dealt. I thought I had no way out of this life that I was living, this life of addiction. But in the county jail, things, I had obviously had time to think. I obviously had huge regrets, and I started to think about, like, what am I going to do with my life? And at the time, the only language I spoke was victimese. It was like, it was my mother's fault. It was my father's fault. Now it's my husband's fault. That's these are the reasons. And you too would use drugs or drink like I do if you had, so I told myself, this was the construct of my belief system that I protected. It was the scaffolding that held my addiction in place. It gave me the reason to continue to use. It was my, get out of life free card, but when you're leveled to such a place like I was, and when you've hurt people and you wake up and you go, something's got to change here, you know. The common denominator is me. I'm the common denominator in all of this. So that thus began my journey back to, I mean, journey, not even back, but journey that the book talks about.
And it is a process, right, to accept responsibility of where you are at, right? And also acknowledge that there was trauma from the past too. And what is that process like to go through and work through your trauma while accepting responsibility for addiction, right? And that work. The other thing that I want our listeners, right, because we have a lot of female listeners that are moms, right? And that really struck me about the book too. In that section, you were describing two things. One, the line where someone tries to intervene and you tell them that it's a domestic dispute and they should not intervene, right? Because in your mind, you did think that, right? Like, this is just between me and Max, my husband, right? Like, this is, yeah. And the other thing is that you were a mom going to Little League, right? Like, showing up as a mom, but also struggling with addiction. And that is something that is common now, having both roles. It's not that you do level your life to the point where you have nobody in it sometimes. It's that you're a mom and you are struggling with addiction.
Well, you know, I mean, Mother's Little Helper, you know, was like the Rolling Stones sang about it years ago, you know, mini bennies, uppers, anything to get you through the day, get the laundry done, get the chores done, you know, and so, but, you know, get my sons dressed and to their practice or Little League practice, or, you know, pick them up on time or do all of that. You know, it's like, it's just like I always had something to metabolize and to keep me going, you know, I believe that the trauma that was unresolved as a kid, I was medicating, you know, that I was medicating. And then when you have a parent that commits suicide, that's always an option. You know, that's like a little gnat buzzing around your face. Well, if it gets too bad, I can, you know, I can get out of here, just like my mom did. You know, I can get out of here. And so, you know, instead of killing yourself with, you know, pills or whatever vehicle, I slowly killed myself with drugs and alcohol, you know, but while maintaining you know, my role as a mother and an apartment manager, painting apartments, showing apartments, taking rent. So there was all of that going on. It was a double life. It was a double life that was in conflict, you know, constant conflict, because it was not the life I intended to live. It's never who I wanted to be or what I wanted to do. When I was a kid, I didn't say, I'm going to grow up and, you know, do some meth, you know, and to get through the day, you know. So, you know, that secret, you know, because I was conditioned to keep secrets as a kid, I grew up keeping secrets. So back to what you were talking about, the book is like writing that for me when everything lined up, you know, and I wrote it and I struggled writing it. I called on the universe, please help me write this, you know, because I can't do it, write it through me. And I got the publisher, and then all of a sudden I'm feeling incredible amounts of shame, you know, the same shame I had when people found out my mother was mentally ill. But it was compiled. It was like enormous. All of the shame that I never dealt with started coming up. I mean, I had dealt with a lot of my shame, but it was back. So I was surprised. And what happened as a result of writing the book with the intention of helping the girls that are incarcerated, helping mothers who are struggling, helping children that are struggling, with that intention of service, became more powerful than my fear. And when the book came out, not immediately, but eventually, it didn't take long. The shame no longer owned me, if you know what I mean. The shame kept me in a box, kept me small, not ruffling any feathers or not, it's that part of me that wanted to remain invisible, but the part of me that wants to make a difference became bigger and larger.
Absolutely. When we do share our stories in service, right, the shame tends to disappear. And that's what I'm hearing. And one of the things that you talk about is how do you go through that process, right? And for those listening that maybe are either in active addiction, in that dual role as mom and in addiction, right? Whatever that is, alcohol, drugs, opioids, obviously on the rise still. How do you start that process, right? I know that it started for you in county jail, but you don't have to get to county jail, right?
No.
How do you start that process if someone out there is in the same place?
Well, it's the first key thing that happened for me, because I was like, defiant, non-compliant, and self-reliant, all of those things. But I had to ask for help. I couldn't do it alone. I could no longer do my life alone, So I asked for help. I got help. I went to a place, a women and children's center with my son, Ricky. My older son was in juvenile hall. So again, the intergenerational trauma is manifesting through my boys that I talk about in the book. I don't say that in the book, but I show that how, history is once again repeating itself. And so, of course, as a mother, I just want to say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, and, for what I did. And I said, I'm sorry. But in hindsight, I can see that living a life of value and making a living amends to my kids happened one day at a time, and that happened by, becoming self-supporting, by getting a job, by showing them that, I too can follow my dreams. My biggest supporters in my writing, have been my boys. They have been, touched by the fact that, I told them I was going to write a book. And I went through a lot of the pages and chapters with my boys before it was published. And they were extremely supportive. But what message am I telling them? I'm telling them that you can transform your life, and this book is about redemption. It's about healing, healing the family system. But I believe that mothers have the power to do that, specifically mothers, women that stay grounded, that for me, it meant then, and it still means, staying connected, sharing my spirituality with my boys, no longer swearing them into the secrecy. They know my secrets, I don't, my parents are gone. I don't know what happened to them, what happened to, that caused my dad to be so unhappy that he had to, damn near drink himself to death. When did my mother, or why did my mother continue to have children when she was schizophrenic, So those questions and answers have gone to the grave with them. I'm exposing myself on a level, to help people and possibly help my family as a result. And it's really interesting that, my ex-husband who remarried, he remarried another woman, not the one I shot.
I was going to say, I hope not the one you shot.
No, not the one I shot, no. But I would have been okay with that eventually. So he married. So I would see him, at family gatherings. And a few years ago, 2 years ago, I think it was, on Thanksgiving, I told him, I'm writing a book and you're in it. And I said, it's an honest book, so I thought when the book came out that, I changed some people's names. I changed his name. And then fast forward, when the book did come out a year later, I think, approximately, he read it and he called me, and I looked at my phone. Oh my God, he's calling me. He's going to, what is this? What's going to happen? Is he going to give me shit or what? And he goes, I just finished your book. He goes, I loved it. I want to read it again, and it was like, oh my God, there you go. I can think that in my mind, this is going to cause havoc, with this relationship. But I can't, imagine the healing that takes place as a result of speaking my truth. And I'm not saying that's going to happen for everyone, but that certainly happened for me, As a result of reading that book, he ended up calling my 2 boys, saying he apologized for not being there more for them.
So again, to the healing aspect of sharing stories, right? And the impact it can have.
Yeah.
For your sons, because I know, having done work with women that are in recovery and do have children, oftentimes that's the first thing that comes to mind, right? Is what impact did this have on my kids? Even as much as when asking for help, I can't go to treatment for 30 days because of my kids, right? Who will be there for my kids? What would you say to women, in both of those, right? In both of those situations, one that are skeptical to reach out for help in certain ways because they're thinking of their kids, and 2, the women that are carrying the shame right now, right? Of even being in recovery, right? Because there are women in recovery in shame because of past interactions with their children and even the current situation with their children. What would you say to them?
Well, it's like we don't transcend humanity once we get sober. It's like it's a process, and as we hear, it's progress, not perfection. So I had to learn how to go easy on myself and be gentle on myself. I mean, as I wrote in the book, I would go to the market and have a panic attack at the beginning. It was hard to even get groceries because I was overwhelmed with making decisions. But it was, it's just one painful foot in front of the other, and trying to be gentle with yourself, and that is changing. For me, it was changing the dialogue, the self-defeating critic that was always going off in my head. I had to create new dialogue, and I did little labels of everything is all right. And that became my mantra. Everything is all right. Everything is all right. Because I never felt it was all right growing up in my house. I never felt it was okay. Nobody told me you were all right. So I started telling myself everything is all right. And as a result, it started cultivating a voice within me that could hush the critics. When I heard the critics jumping off in my head, I just go, everything's all right. And it didn't matter if I didn't believe it at first, because, that book was empty. I didn't know how I was going to feed Ricky, at the time. There were so many things. My son was in juvenile hall. I didn't feel like everything was all right, but it didn't matter. I said the mantra, and then it was like I was growing. It was a muscle, like going to the gym, picking up a weight, and that muscle got stronger, and that voice became louder. And it's like something I've carried, for 27 years, that when I start getting in self-doubt or shame, I just have to, it's self-soothing, something I never learned to do. And for the mothers that are out there struggling, like, how do I go to, treatment? I'm helping one woman right now that her family member has a son that, and it appears that she's having problems. So they're doing an intervention, And so, what I would encourage someone to do, there are places you can go with your children, by the way, these days. But I think it's better if you're able to have somebody help you out and either do that, or, if you can't possibly go into treatment, then just, there's virtual meetings, there's virtual support, talk to a therapist, just talk to somebody. I had a real resistance with the 12-step approach at the beginning, but I was out of ideas. What I was doing obviously didn't work. So, it was working for people that I saw, people that had full, rich, creative lives. It was working for them. What are they doing? What are they doing that is making a difference? And so, I just started asking questions and seeking support. Does that answer your question?
Oh, absolutely. I think that when you brought up sort of that inner critic, right? I call it the inner roommate, because I don't know if you've read The Untethered Soul.
I haven't.
Oh, Wendy, you would love that book. Yes.
I got to get it. Okay.
I may have to send you a copy. But
yeah.
in that book, he talks about your inner roommate and how your inner roommate's always talking and it's always negative, right? And I relate to that inner roommate or inner critic as you referenced it. But what's interesting is that you said something to the effect of, I was never told everything was okay. It was almost even a step further, right? You were told that everything wasn't okay. And you were shown too that everything wasn't okay. And I think, and I don't want to quote it wrong, so correct me if I do, but there is a point where your mother says to you, you're bad, or some version of that in the book, right? So the dialogue sounds like, going back to the intergenerational part, you were brought up thinking everything is wrong, everything is not okay, and you're not okay.
Yeah, yes, and she did. And I heard many times growing up that you're bad. Mm-hmm. I also, when I had a feeling or, it was dismissed, like, I'm scared. Well, there's nothing to be scared of, or, just things, any of my feelings were never validated. It's, that's why I think it's so important to validate our kids' feelings, to hear them, instead of dismiss it, because then you feel like you're being gaslighted, and, it's like, you don't trust yourself. You don't have that inner trust, that inner knowing, that inner GPS that I've learned to tap into, which guided me to writing the book. I was being guided to do this. So, if I'm in self-doubt and questioning every move because of my conditioning, and, the first 7 years of my life were, my mother killed herself when I was 7, were when is the developmental stages of a child, mm-hmm. when the architect is being put up, and it's like the neural pathways, and if you're on fight, flight, freeze, or fold constantly, then you're taking that into the world. And that's extremely hard on the body, extremely, and in the book, I talk about, dealing with how I dealt with trauma, and there's, thankfully, today there's a conversation around trauma. When I was growing up, the only people that suffered PTSD were the guys coming back from Vietnam, mm-hmm. So, like I said at the beginning, that I work with adolescents. A lot of them have trauma, and we're able to offer support and the kind of, first off, we create a space where they feel safe enough to talk about it, and it's interesting that what we do is we give the family their own therapist, and we give the kiddo their therapist. So they have a sense of safety. Well, the kid is our client, is our, first priority, because we want to make them feel safe, because obviously they're acting out something that needs support. So I never got that, I never ever got that. And, it's no wonder I questioned, every decision I made when I first got sober, or, but initially when I first got sober, I did enlist a lot of people's support, sometimes too much so. Well, what do you think? What do you think I should do? What do you think I should do? Until, I like, well, what do I do? But as I started to demonstrate that, hey, I can show up for a job. Oh, hey, I can pay the rent. Oh, hey, I'm paying the bills. I'm taking care of the kids. My son, it just got out of juvenile hall, and that was really difficult, healing those wounds, which we're still doing today.
I was going to ask you, do you feel like those wounds are healed? And I know it's a process, and it has been, but.
Well, I have really incredible relationships with my sons today. I work for Have a Soul, my youngest son's nonprofit, which, gives out shoes to those at-risk youth and homeless people. So I work with them, and we're very close. He came over yesterday, and we had lunch together. I didn't call him. I didn't promote it. He just did it. He wanted to spend some time with me. And then my older son, recently he got sick in December with COVID and secondary conditions, and just had surgery this week. But, I couldn't physically be there with him at the hospital because he went in 3 times. It was very life-threatening. And there was a part of me that was just so anguished, just because as a mother, I wanted to be by his side. I wanted to be in the hospital room. I wanted to advocate for him. But I'm at a point now where I've done a lot of advocating for clients and for substance abuse and mental health, that I was able to advocate for him, calling the hospital, talking to the charge nurse, talking to his nurse, what's going on, and I was able to be there for him in a way that was very healing to me and to him. So we've been FaceTiming, much more now. He, really appreciated how I was able to show up for him, even from a distance, even though I wanted to be there in person. And I couldn't be. But so, it's just like these opportunities, that sometimes they present themselves, and you'd go, oh my God, why is this happening? But it's like another opportunity to heal the rift, the relations, because my older son is married and with his own kids. So he's much more independent than my younger son has been. But I have great relationships with them. And that's the result of me as a mother wanting to heal that more than anything else. That was that's the reason, it's like one of the reasons why I wanted to get sober in the first place.
Can I tell you what I hear, Wendy? I hear authentic. I hear that you have an authentic relationship with them, right? And a safe relationship, that they know that they can come to you, right? And I also wonder if the sharing of this story took away some shame for them, right? If they did struggle with any. Do you feel like there was some release of shame for them by having the story shared?
I think they're proud of their mom. I think they're proud of their mom. I don't know that they would claim any shame around. I don't know. They're boys,
Yeah.
And, they're,
Others. Yeah.
yeah, that there's no shame as far as I know. I just know that they're very proud of me for doing it and going for my dream. That is a message I want to give my sons and my grandkids, who were all there at my book launch party, my grandkids and my kids, it doesn't get much better than that.
No, and that is truly what life is about, is connection and showing up. And I know you talked about making amends, right? Going back, and how that doesn't happen all at once. I think it never ends, right? It's showing up for all of these moments consistently, continually, that feels like the amends to me.
Yeah, I, incrementally did damage with my using, and I'm incrementally, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, healing the relationships, and it's like, in spite of what it may look like on paper, because if anybody would have looked at my life when I was getting out of county jail and living in a transitional living with my youngest son, an older son, they would have seen it as what a tragedy. Waste. I was on welfare and food stamps. Of course, they couldn't fast forward, and life is not a still picture of one still in your life. It's like it's a moving picture. And, I could not have even imagined that I would do the work that I do, and have been doing for over 20 years with addicts and people suffering from mental health. I could not imagine that I would restore the relationships with my family. I could not imagine I would write a book or work on this second book, that's about my adolescence. I could not have imagined, because my bandwidth for life experience was so narrow.
Absolutely. Tell us what is ahead for you. I know you mentioned the second book.
But yes, the second book is about my adolescence. I don't, because I think that teens really don't have a lot of material out there of, people. They're struggling with different, like social media and internet is a lot different than it was back when I was growing up. But the emotional thread is still the same. So I'm writing a book about becoming a ward of the court, and going through juvenile hall and foster homes. And I want to reach kids that are struggling. And so I found a way through, language or through writing to reach more people, So that's coming up for me. COVID has also been a blessing, because I've really been locked down like so many other people, but writing while I'm locked down. Yeah, it's kind of contained here. I don't know when I'll physically be going back to work. I'm doing everything virtually these days, like so many people. Mm-hmm. But it's like I feel blessed because, it was a bit of a learning curve when we first got locked down, but I was able to pick up on how to do events and for my work and things like that.
Yeah, I think it's been a learning curve for a lot of people. Absolutely. Wendy, if people want to find the book, we're going to do a giveaway, and I'm going to promote it. We're going to get a copy and give it away for anyone that's interested. So look at our Instagram at WellSeekers. We'll have a giveaway in conjunction with this episode. But for people that want the book, where can they find it?
Well, it's on Amazon, Motherload, LOAD. And then I do have a website. I think you're going to post.
Wendy Adamson. Have all of these links, but just in case someone's listening. So Amazon has everything, and Wendy's book.
Yes, absolutely. And we hope that it will soon have my next book.
Yeah. I'll be praying.
Thank you. I already have a publisher, so that's a big one. So
that's amazing. It truly is.
Yeah.
Wendy, thank you for sharing your story, not only here, but in writing, because I truly believe that it is through conversation that change happens and that healing comes. And that, like you said, sharing our stories takes away the shame. It just does, for ourselves and for the person that's receiving the story.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on. It's been such a pleasure.
We'll see you soon.
Yes.
All right, we'll be right back on WellSeekers. After a long day, taking time to love yourself and your friends and your family more well can be a challenge. We're so burnt out and exhausted and stressed from working so hard during the day, we forget to love the people and the places and the things that are important to us. Well, Lucia at Night is here to help. We're going to be a retreat and a treat for your day. A place to laugh, to connect, and to learn to love yourself and others more well. We're going to talk about relationships, ways to sleep better. We'll have expert guests, personal stories, maybe even a musical guest or two. We'll share behind the scenes into my own life as well, my friends, my family, and of course, my relationships. So close the door on your day and light up your night with Lucia at Night. Also, make sure to check out more at wellseekers.com for simple and real-life ways to bring wellness home. I'll see you tonight on Lucia at Night.
Thanks for being part of the Seekerhood. We couldn't do this without you. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to WellSeekers, and thanks so much again to Wendy Adamson for sharing her powerful story and helping us shatter some shame today. Since we usually end each episode of WellSeekers with Lucia's List, I thought that at first I was going to do books, but if you listen to episode 1, we talked about specifically shame-shattering stories. Motherload was on the list. So if you go back to Lucia's List from episode 1, that was one of the things we talked about, shame-shattering stories around addiction. So check out that list of my top 5 books if you haven't. For today's Lucia's List, I wanted to talk about top 3 things you can do to start shattering shame. Based upon some of those theories that we talked about in shame resiliency theories, it's all about connecting to what's causing you shame, and then also letting some stories in from other people to help offer you empathy that you're not alone in some of the things that may have happened. Some of the things that Wendy and I talked about was trauma and how trauma can lead to a lot of shame. So for Lucia's List, I'm going to give you my top 3 ways to start shattering shame today. Number 1. There's a book called Shatter, Shame, and Shine. It's by Mary Alice Coleman. It's about transformational information and guidance specifically for women silently struggling with their issues of childhood abuse, pain, and trauma. And even for those that think they're not, which I love the name of that title. So I would suggest checking out this book. We'll put a link below. It really walks you through your own personal story, talking about what is the foundation of you, how to build you as a person, who you really are, the workings of awareness, a new blueprint, a new belief for you. So it's really, this is your own personal roadmap, helps get you there. Number 2, we're working from the top. 1 through 3. I know sometimes I go backwards. Number 2, my second item on Lucia's List this week is affirmations. So while you're on this journey looking into your shame, there's something that's called reframing your shame affirmations. We put 3 of them on our Instagram this week. They're going to be there tomorrow. So I encourage you to look at those. You can also just do a Google search for shame busting affirmations and you'll get a whole list. Otherwise, if you follow us on Instagram at WellSeekers. You can also follow me at Lucia Naz, and I'll have them too. But 3 shame-busting affirmations. They'll be there tomorrow, but starting to incorporate some of these affirmations into your daily morning ritual, nighttime ritual, to start reframing some of those bad stories your mind's told you about you. And then the last thing on Lucia's List, number 3, is to seek out some of that empathy, whether it's sharing and hearing stories with people you trust and feel close to, or to start reading books like Wendy's, or going back to Lucia's List from our first time where we listed 5 other books of stories pertaining to addiction. So reading these books and really starting to see that you're not alone. So making connections either to people's stories and that they've written, or making connections to people's story in your own personal life that you really trust. Those are my top 3 suggestions this week on how to start shattering shame in your own life. We are so honored that you have been here with us today, listening to this story. We hope that these stories and solutions help guide you on your road to rising, to coming back, because you deserve it. You are enough. And if you haven't started, it's never too late, never, ever too late to start again, to rise, to come back, and to start shedding some of that shame and really stepping into who you truly are. From all of us here at WellSeekers, thank you so much for joining us. We hope you'll stay connected with us online at WellSeekers, at Lucia Naz, and of course, our relationship show at Lucia at Night. We will be back in 2 weeks, actually talking about policy, how you can get involved in changing some of the systems that have been created that stop people from getting help. So make sure you stick with us for that. Until then, thanks for being a part of our family. Thanks for being a part of our journey and letting us be a part of yours. We'll talk to you soon on WellSeekers.
How would you like to join the conversation? Email us anytime at hello@wellseekers.com.